Michael, thank you for being here. Here. Barbara is not, so we're going to use Teppy. That gives us 1, 2, 3, 4. That's what we need, correct? Does anybody know if Alan will be joining us?
I got no notification.
Not typically. Just not typically. Maybe.
Or Lewis, has anybody heard? Not online, correct?
Nope.
Blair, we're ready to rock if you are.
Morning, Vern.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the, well, that is hot as could be, the January 10th Human Services meeting, it being 9:03. I'd like to bring the meeting to order. We could do our roll call.
Allen, Kenyon,
Here.
Lewis, Silva, Tarver, Linder, Surges,
Here.
Teppy.
Teppy here.
You have an in-person quorum.
Okay, and we are going to ask for permission for remote attendance of Bill Tarver. And is Mike Linder online or not? No. Okay, so Mr. Tarver is the only remote at this point. I do not see Miss Allen on there or Miss Lewis. Is that correct? So do we have consensus that Mr. Tarver can join?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Approval of minutes, Mr. Kenyon.
Approved by unanimous consent. Approve the minutes as printed.
Roll call or a?
Nope, just all in favor.
Favor. Opposed? Thank you. Public comment, I don't see anybody on line, and I don't have anybody in the audience. Monthly financial reports. Those are attached. Kathy is coming to the podium.
I just wanted to point out a new report that we've started to add in the human services packet. And it is it was a report that used to be put together years ago, and we've brought it back.
Kathy, one moment. Do we have a copy of that we can put
It
on
should be in your
screen?
packet. It should be in your packet. It is page, I think, 12 and 13. Oh, there we go.
There we go.
It shows the revenues and expenses, the activity for the health insurance fund of the county. So all of the employer and employee contributions funnel across the county, funnel through this fund, and then all of our health insurance, dental insurance are paid out of this fund. So if you go to page 2, page 3, actually, you can see at the bottom right there, I'm sorry, yeah, you can see the fund balance of the health insurance fund at the end of the year. And I've got comparative years going, 21, 22, 23, and we've just started 24. And when we met with our broker several months ago, I asked him, what do you think is a good fund balance for our health insurance fund? Because we're having this discussion at the county generally, mostly for our general fund. And he said anywhere between 25 and 50%, because with health insurance claims, you just don't know. We don't have a policy specifically on our health insurance fund yet, but something I think we can look at. So if you take a look, our fund balance for the health insurance fund.
Kath, can I pump the brakes for a second?
Sure.
So what I'd like to do right now is bring you up to speed with us and calibrate past reports and considerations with what you're looking at to make sure that we're on the same page.
Sure.
So we came out of a collective. We went to an individual. We've been doing by all reports, a fabulous job of monitoring that and adjusting. We've always looked in terms of a reserve account that we had originally set a reserve amount of $9 million. That was totally pulled out of the sky. We needed to set a number. That's what we chose. We were then told a year or two later that number's too tall, that people could look at that and say, you have too much in reserve, you're charging our rates too high. If you lower that, the rates will come down. It's not industry standard. We said, okay. We do track in the reports, and again, our reports are homegrown. So 5 years ago, they didn't exist. We've worked with assured partners as the technologies become available. But that's what we look to say, are we within or with, outside of tolerance at approximately $1,450,000 per month of expenditures. If you can take these numbers and tell us where that conversation, that 9 million reserve and where that is that in here,
Right.
where does that correlate to this new report?
So our fund balance, currently at the end of 2023 is about $7 million in this fund.
Show me where that is on here. Is that
The line at
the 2023 actual at the bottom?
It says 7,116,000. So that's, and we haven't closed out the year entirely yet. There could be a few more expenses.
Good morning, Anita.
But generally there's $7 million of fund balance in the health insurance fund. So just kind of projecting, what would be a target fund balance?
So we're right. So are you suggesting we're right in the middle? So if it's at
We're right in the middle.
7.1, at 25%, it's 4.8, at 50%, it's 9.6. We're kind of right in the sweet spot, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So we're good.
Yes.
Unless you're an advocate to say we should be at 25%.
I'm just throwing it out there based on our, conversations. I don't know if we need to have this in terms of a written policy for the county, because we don't necessarily have a written policy for the health insurance fund. We're using 25% for our general fund, and generally we would use that for other funds. But it's something to think about, and I'm presenting the information so that everybody can see the fund balance of this fund.
I am not comfortable with that. These reserves can swing wildly if you had a couple of people with an organ transplant, a severe, that's not a lot of money. So I will challenge you by saying there needs to be some industry standard, some best practices modeling that we should be relying upon from not only the practical standpoint of saying this is the reason. Blair, who can we? Does someone in the room have their computer speaker on?
No, it's a phone 244. The phone.
Okay, thank you. We need to find some way to reconcile for ourselves something that we're comfortable with, along with an industry standard, along with
Sure.
the unions won't argue that we're keeping too much there. And I would like to ask the committee to challenge you and Ms. Labrillo to come up with what that model might look like. And if you're comfortable ratifying that in some way, shape, or form, I would be amenable to that.
Yeah, I think it would be important to have some parameters of why we have, the fund balance that we have. Yeah.
Agreed. And again, I'm being as candid as I can. When we said 9 million, we did not have a rationale for that. We felt that was comfortable. To be told that we should reduce it to 6 based on this, we're okay with that too. But that's a pretty wild swing. So let's come up with something a little bit more substantive.
Sure.
If I can challenge you with that,
Sure.
that would be yay. And thank you so much for putting it. Does anybody have any questions on this report? And understand where we're going with this, but we're in really good shape is what we're saying. That was a question. No comment. Wow. Are we in really good shape on this? We're in the sweet spot. Yes.
If our goal is to have 50%, then yes. If our goal is to have somewhere between 25 and 50, yes.
Perfect. Any comments on that? Thank you for all you're doing in the transparency, not only for this committee, but what you're doing for each committee. And some of the conversations I've had with Kathy is this stuff needs to be, every committee that you have, we need to be able to see this level of transparency. We just don't spend a lot of money here except for insurance costs. So, thank you.
Sure.
Human Services. Jamie, we have one or two items that I think one of them is going to be a pretty lengthy conversation, at least 20 minutes. So if you can just tailor this accordingly.
Certainly. We have the usual monthly reports in place, nothing particularly out of tolerance. As per a discussion a couple months ago, we talked about, the preventable claims and pursuing some kind of idea of risk management, or if we wanted to pursue some risk management. We did include in the reports again this month, some information about preventable versus non-preventable claims. If you would like to talk about this month, we can. If you'd like to defer it to another month when we have a lighter agenda, we certainly can. That's up to you. Not this month?
Not this month.
Okay. We'll bring it back next month. and
Can you
see if
send it to us?
it's in the packet.
Oh,
So it is in the packet
Gotcha.
with the other workers' comp and liability reports.
Yeah.
So you can feel free to look at it and let me know if you have any questions.
Yeah, I just. thought
And
that was
how
something
how
more.
much of the preventable, non-preventable comes into those conversations of wellness and being proactive? And your predecessor was a strong advocate of this, and then COVID happened, and nobody wanted to be in person, nobody wanted to be prodded, poked, nobody wanted to come in and do this stuff, and that's not just here, that's corporate America as well. Now that we're beyond that, you know, where does that leave us in terms of that wellness, and is this a part and parcel of that?
It's not a part and parcel of that. We're talking about preventable and non-preventable workers' comp and liability
Got it.
instances. But to your point on the wellness, we did change that last year, and the wellness benefit now sends our employees to their physician for a wellness visit. So it eliminates the large in-person gathering or any additional poke and prod. And what we really want to do in terms of wellness, one of the biggest steps towards wellness is getting that person in front of their physician and doing what their physician recommends, rather than having a certain screening that they may or may not then take those results to a doctor and get treatment. This puts them in front of their doctor. So I think it's, it's not something you're going to see an instant change in, but I think over time, I think that's one of the biggest steps towards wellness that we can do for our employees.
Okay, so the report, so the information you were speaking of is work comp, preventable, non-preventable.
Work comp and other liabilities such as car accidents, building damage, things like that, other types of liabilities.
If we could set that for the next agenda and give that the appropriate amount of time,
I was gonna suggest.
would that be acceptable to you?
Certainly, yeah, we can do that whenever you want. And if, the members of the committee would like to review the reports that are included in the packet, let me know if there's an additional piece of information that you would like. I certainly can provide that.
How, if I can ask, how is the relationship between your department and the other department elected offices in relation to the work comp initiatives? I think at one point in time, I would characterize this as not very cohesive. In the very recent past, we were very much all on the same page. Are we still seeing that level of cooperation?
We get good cooperation from our departments and elected offices in terms of making the proper reports in a timely fashion, getting us the information we need. When we do see things related to preventable, such as we had an employee trip over a mop handle because they were using a mop handle to press a button that was out of reach. Things like that. When we've contacted the department and said, can we please get a proper step stool? We can't use a mop handle. And we've gotten good responses from our departments in correcting those things. All of those things, however, are corrected after the fact. We don't know about them until they happen, which means we already have a workers' comp case on file because of it. I think there is a lot of room to be more proactive in this. However, we do not have a staff person that is devoted or has the time and capability to be proactive in that. But I think it would be well worth the insurance liability fund's money to have someone working on that. And I think once we review these reports in terms of the dollar amount associated with preventable accidents and injuries, I think you could easily have someone whose focus is preventing those and making sure, doing walkthroughs and things like that to make sure that we have good preventable.
Within your budget
processes.
structure now and your org chart, do you have a position that is unfilled at this time for that? Or are you just suggesting this might be a good idea later?
I'm suggesting it might be a good idea to talk about in the future budget cycle. So when we look at the next.
Okay,
budget
Nita, one
cycle.
second. Yep. And how are we, in terms, we have for the past several years been trending very positively for frequency and severity on work comp. Are we maintaining that? I know we've had a couple of large issues come up most recently that I'm expecting have gone well past our internal and have gone into stop loss.
And for what it's worth, that was a completely unpreventable. There was no
Absolutely.
county at
Understood.
fault associated with it. So there have been a few larger claims. We've also had some larger claims that were marked as preventable. So I think there is definitely room for improvement in that. But we don't currently have a staff who specializes in that or has the bandwidth to do that. It's actually it's a really big job, and it's something that people specialize in.
Ms. Lewis?
So I'm a huge fan of getting a staff person to do this kind of work. It's falls under risk management. And it's not like after it happens, we'll take a look at it. This is like a person that goes around and looks at all our things and says, here's your potential for the risk of it. And then we do what we want with that. And we make decisions based on all these potential things. And they're also the people that they can just go around and, like you said, you don't use a mop handle, I mean, and all we need is one person that loses a hand or a finger or anything like that. And we're really out of whack so I think we have to do the risks versus.
The risk analysis. I mean, and
Yes,
you would
thank
find,
you.
you would find me very much
Yeah,
supportive of that.
So I think it's probably a position that we wouldn't put in until the next budget cycle, which is not gonna be that long.
Mhm.
So maybe if we can gather data, and I don't mind helping you if you want, and then maybe do a presentation even like in April or May before we actually get into the next budget cycle.
If I could
Thanks.
challenge Jamie, if we could challenge you and Kathy to maybe look at the insurance liability fund and do a, cost benefit analysis to maybe say, listen, if we bring on an additional individual, this is what the expectations might look like. And while, that might look like, wow, we're adding additional staff, if that really results in additional savings well beyond the cost of that staff, the spend a buck to make a buck thing is kind of in play. So Kathy, if you wouldn't mind working on that, I think that's well worth the effort.
Mr. Chairman, Alan.
Oh, good morning, Deb. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, thanks. We don't have to reinvent this wheel. I believe that the Forest Preserve a year or 2 or 3 ago did exactly this drill and added a person for what was that term you used? Risk prevention. So maybe I or someone else could take a responsibility to go and just see how that worked out there, how they did that, and if that paid off for them.
I think we just got us a volunteer. Step forward.
Well,
Right.
it's just that I remember this conversation over there. I think we had to do it because of our insurance over there, the organization that we get our insurance through. But at any rate, I believe the results were very successful, and I'll be glad to follow up with that.
Agreed. Debbie, thank you so much. And if we could note, Mr. Lindner, thank you for joining us as well.
Good morning.
Okay,
Apologize for
Anita,
being
pardon me?
So I apologize for being late.
No, happy you're here. Anita, did you have anything else?
Nope, I'm good. Thank you.
Super. Jamie, if you have a little bit of direction on that, and then let's give that the breadth it needs at the next meeting.
Okay, sounds good. Thank
Super.
you.
Complete training reports.
Sexual harassment after January.
Email just came out.
Man.
So you got to do it again. Just a reminder, it's every year. So get it out of the way and then those reminders will stop bothering you. Just to make sure everybody is aware, if you are not on a county network computer, you will have to fill out the sheet that is attached to the email and provide that to Human Resources so that we can manually check you off. It only works if you are on a county network computer for it to automatically record you're watching it.
Okay, let's move to we have 2 or 3 items coming up, but one of them is item 9A, old business ordinance creating Illinois residency requirement for county employees. For those elected officials in the room, I have brought this up in all 3 of the committees that I'm involved with, from finance to executive to county board, to now bring it here. I will reiterate my concerns with this. This has the potential to finally push the envelope in regards to this board's ability to set policy for the elected offices versus only the departments. I am not comfortable, nor do I understand where that line in the sand is. It is difficult to have this conversation. On the other hand, there are 24 of us charged as a board of directors with setting policy. And this is a policy conversation that has been brought to both sides of this. I will speak as honestly as I can. Former chief judge, state's attorney, have come forward and said, we require the ability to have employees that are not living in Illinois. I believe that the Scott Berger's office, because Scott has multiple roles within that office, I'm just going to use Scott's name, has an employee that lives out of state. Excuse me. That's 3 that we're going for, and I am recently made aware that the state's attorney's office may have just looked at a new hire that is equally out of state. The problem, as I said in each of those committee meetings, this is not a problem, this is not a wound, this is not a scab that I am picking at, so please do not kill the messenger. However, I am being told from finance, I am being told from payroll, I am being told from human services, we're not set up to handle this. There are laws for each one of the states. There are tax ramifications for each one of the states that we would be hiring an employee within. At that point, it becomes a policy decision. And I bring it to you in this committee as if you want to use the birthplace of this conversation. I'm sure, I want to advance this as fast as possible to a larger body of individuals to have that. But I would open up this conversation here by simply asking, is my edification and explanation accurate in what I've just told you? And then let's go around the horn really quick and just say, what are your feelings on that? Because if we can't even get it out of committee saying we should or should not, I'm not interested in kicking the can to another committee. So Jamie, and Kathy and Christine, how close was I? Am I?
I think that provides a good background. This did come before this committee a couple of months ago, or before the board a couple of months ago, when we decided to forward it to this month to take a closer look at it. I think it's important to understand the challenges that come with an out-of-state employee and the considerable additional costs associated with that. Ultimately, the 3, now 4 employees that reside out of the state of Illinois all reside in different states. Each time we add a state, that vastly increases the amount of workload for both payroll and human resources. Consider how many resolutions we pass each year as a part of housekeeping to maintain our handbook legally compliant with the statutes of the state of Illinois, and multiply that by 4. For each state, you would have to have a legally compliant handbook in. The employment laws vary wildly from state to state, and we as an organization would need to provide a set of legally compliant policies with each state that we have employees within. We have a health insurance program that has a network of doctors in the state of Illinois, which definitely changes the way we provide benefits to people out of state. We would have to consider as a board whether you'd like to expand your health insurance program to other states. We have a workers' compensation program. Remote workers are covered by workers' compensation laws, and they are covered by the workers' compensation laws of the state in which they are physically performing work. Those employees working remotely are physically performing their work in the state that they reside, which means we would be bound to the workers' compensation laws of the state in which they reside, which again can vary greatly from state to state. Our workers' compensation attorney is here in the state of Illinois, which means if we did have a claim in one of those other states, we would need to contract an attorney that is licensed to practice law in that state and is then able to be an expert in the workers' compensation laws of those states. That is not something that we currently have budgeted for. We do pay a flat rate to our workers' compensation attorney for her services for the year, so we do not have a variable budget associated with that. Then we also have the issue of unemployment. We are self-insured for unemployment, which we are only able to do because we are a public employer within this state. We have found with the other states that we go to that we have to actually buy unemployment insurance in those states because we are not exempt from that because we are not a public employer within those states. So in addition to having to buy an additional workers' compensation policy, we have to pay unemployment insurance as well to those states. That is just part of the additional work that's associated with it. We have to provide labor law posters to those employees that are compliant with their states. It really is a lengthy list. In addition to that work that would be for the Human Resources Department, the payroll department would then have to pay state income tax within those states, which means they have to get set up as an employer and they have to report wages to that state. We report wages once to Illinois on behalf of all of our employees, and each time you add another state, you essentially multiply that work. I believe if you want to allow as a board out-of-state employment, the board needs to understand that that would come as a considerable cost and that we would need additional staff to manage the additional workload associated with adding these additional staff. That's certainly something that the board can choose to do, but when you make that decision, I just want you to be prepared that we will need to request additional staff for this additional work.
So I have 2 comments on this and to editorialize, if you will. At both of my main businesses, we are struggling with right now with the concept of remote workforce. You know what? You just can't hire anybody that, I mean, the requirement is how much flexibility do I have to work from home? I mean, that's just what comes out of their mouths. And I get it because I have a 25-year-old daughter that, you know, works for one of the top 3 public accounting firms down in Dallas. And when she just started looking at, you know, possibly interviewing and seeing what's out there in the world, her comment to me was, gosh, Dad, if you know what, I can go to work for this firm and make more money, but I have to be in their office 9 to 5 Monday through Friday. And I really like this firm over here because this, and of course I'm exaggerating a bit, but you get the point. You know, and I have all this flexibility and work from home, multiply that by that entire workforce, and that's what we're getting. I don't want that in another breath. While that is a symptom of the marketplace and a reality, the flip side of that same coin is, if I want to work from home, who are you to tell me where my home should be? Just because you're based out of Chicago doesn't mean I'm not out of Arizona or out of LA or out of New York. And why should you care as long as I'm getting the job done? I understand all that. And my point to this board of directors is to say, if you're going to allow that, You need to find the funding mechanism for the additional costs it'll take to do that and realize it. And I think Kathy can probably put together, here is the dollar figure. And if that dollar figure is too tall, maybe it would be unpalatable. If it's small enough, maybe it wouldn't be that big of an issue, but it is an issue that we need to address. Additionally, there's the political side of this where people are kind of calling out saying, if this is taxpayer money in Illinois, specifically from Kane County, then the employees that are receiving that money, gosh darn it, should live in Illinois. I don't know if that's a correct political statement or not. I don't know that that's a reality in the marketplace anymore. But this is part of the conversation that we need to be having. And again, don't kill the messenger. Jamie and I are just bringing forth some of the realities that we're seeing from departments. And now it's to the point where you have a one-off or a two-off, that's no big deal. But now you're seeing a trend. And as we get to that trend, we now need to get in front of it. So, and believe me, we've discussed each iteration of saying, by golly, just call them independent contractors and then they're not an employee and we don't have to do this. Hey, find a service where we can lease these people from that service, find an outside service that will say, we'll gather all your outside employees. And then we have a fixed cost on what that might be. That's not been met with open arms from the offices. I don't know that the department heads have said that, but I've heard that from the elected offices. So we're just to the point that the conversation needs to go to the next level. So if I might, only because Mr. Lindner, you're the next one on the list. Do you have any? Give us 2 minutes.
Well, tacking on to something you just said, I think there has to be a way that this has been conquered by other employees, both public and private. We need to look at that. But I have a concern if we already have 3 or 4 people in that circumstance, if we change the rule, do we tell them they have to move or quit? Or do we keep them on as grandfathered for 20 years or whatever? I think that's a big consideration in terms of what we do. I'm a little bit old school. I believe in working from home, but I sort of believe in being able to see your employee once in a while. And some of these circumstances we're in, I don't know how often those people actually touch ground within the county. That's a question I'd have.
I appreciate that perspective. Deb? Ms.
Hi,
Allen, are you with us?
I'm starting my video in honor
There
of
you
this
go.
conversation.
Yes,
Hello.
Morning.
she doesn't
I
have-
want to just, if I can take my 2 minutes, I have this background I want to share. This was an argument that was, I think, entirely political 20 years ago. We had a new health department executive director who wanted to bring with him his epidemiologist, I'm guessing a special set of skills. But of course, she lived like someplace in New Jersey. And so he wanted to keep her on as someone he trusted and respected. And that caused a brouhaha in the county. But I think it was, my best judgment is that it was a political thing. We ended up hiring an epidemiologist locally and solved that problem, and it went away. So I guess a question that I would have is, if someone is being hired who's going to work out of state, is that because there's a special set of skills that we are hiring, and we can only get those skills by hiring that person, and that person happens to be far away? That is a question that I would ask. Now, I think in Mr. Berger's department, that's entirely true. The person who is out of state wasn't always out of state and happens to be an expert and continues to be an expert in Illinois trends. So I appreciate that we have a grandfather in here so that we can protect at least that employee. And the skill set that comes with. But when we're talking about new hires, can we ask that question? Is there not someone in Illinois who has the skill set?
Deb, another
you-
fabulous perspective. Thank you so much.
Well,
Jamie has
and
her
you-
hand up.
And you just mentioned something too, Cliff. You said that your daughter's experience was that if she was going to work in person, she would be paid more. So is that something we would consider here? We have extra expenses with an out-of-state person, so that person would be paid less so that we would have the money available to cover those expenses.
Yeah, Deb,
thanks
if
for-
I can, I'm going to let Jamie chime in for a second here, but I can tell you this. You know, I've had it thrown in my face that, you know, are you telling me that, you know, of the 80,000 unemployed people in this area, we can't find one that could fill that role, that we have to go out of state for it? And my response was, golly, I just don't know. Let's take a look into that. But yeah, you know, I understand the notion of a specialty, and maybe there's not somebody in the area that has that specialty. And while that might be a one-off, I think by and large, you know, we should be able to and find someone, and maybe we come up with a program that says, if we have truly looked and have exhausted that search, we now need to expand to the next level, which might be a remote individual from another state. I don't know. That's a wonderful perspective, though. Jamie, you had a comment?
I just wanted to include that the four situations that are current are all people who worked for this county locally and chose to move away
Oh, interesting.
rather than new. I just, for what it's worth, they were not people that were advertised, you know, and applied for a position to work remotely. They were in-person employees who then moved away and took the remote option. I also want to.
Which is different than the challenge we're having now, where the request is coming in to hire somebody that's not within the area. Am I?
No, it is also a person who is an existing employee who is moving away.
Okay, thank you.
So that is the
I was not
situation
aware.
for all four of those employees. And ultimately, I think, you know, it does include a grandfather clause, so it's not meant to disrupt the people that were given permission to move away, rather to stop this from continuing to grow.
Look, we're taking shape already. Look at that. Okay, next would be
Mr. Chairman,
Mr.
Bates, please.
Ms. Bates, we're going to go down the list first, and then we can
Okay.
circle back.
Thank you.
That's
Okay.
okay. Mr. Kenyon? Any comments?
Yeah. No.
All good. Ms. Lewis?
Of course. So I would like to know in a round ballpark what the cost per employee really is. And I think that Kathy's fantastic with doing that already, but that was my first thing. We're saying we have all these costs, but what are they really? I don't know what that means. So that's one thing. I do like the fact that the four people that moved on their own choice, that they would be grandfathered in. However, saying that, I actually think as a county that we need to have our employees here because, you know, I get this remote learning, okay? And I get remote learning 2 or 3 days out of the week, but I also, even being on the board, I understand the importance of people being in person and in proximity. And if we have an employee in Alabama and they're doing work for us in Illinois, they don't know the flavor of what's really important in Illinois. And I think that's incredibly important. And I think that if we allow that long-term, I think we're gonna lose something.
Appreciate that perspective as well. Thank you. Dr. Silva?
Good morning, Chair. I have a lot of questions and I have an ongoing conversation that I could have with you, Director, probably an hour long. But let's.
Sounds like
simplify.
lunch, by the way.
Yeah, right. So let's simplify. Elected officials will have internal control, so there's nothing really that we could say about that except give advice if they ask for it. The other question I would have is, what have been the circumstances? How long has this work from home in other states? How long has that been going on?
It really was not seen at all prior to COVID. We had the first employee do that during COVID and was made that transfer without notifying anyone in finance or human resources, and was in that situation for some time before we found out about it to address it. So at that point, it was too late. We had to go back and pay those state taxes to be legally compliant. The next time it came up was an elected official. And we did, dispute that, but the elected official did allow that person to move anyway. So again, it more or less forces our hand to do the compliance associated with it, which again is very taxing on the departments. I think it's difficult to put a per employee cost on it. It would be more likely a per state cost.
I hear what you're saying. And the fact that there hasn't been an issue, a work comp issue out of state, or the fact that there aren't many employees, I commend you because you're having the foresight to identify the things that could go wrong and how much it's going to cost your department and other departments. So, but I'm happy to hear there hasn't been a lot of bad things associated with this yet. So I guess my next statement would be, I thought of the words forced hand before you said them. So we're thinking in the same direction. This was not something that we were ready to do, that we had planned to do, but our hands were forced. And I heard from from someone who I think of highly, that businesses thrive when they know how to pivot. So this can be a way for us to pivot. And I think we really have to identify the fact that there are some highly specialized fields out there where we do need this expertise. So I'm just going to throw it out there. When my children were young, pediatric neurologists were very, very uncommon. They were highly specialized, and it wasn't as easy to find one near you. Something like that, I think is important that we're able to hire that individual for those circumstances, someone who needs high amount of training, a lot of experience, someone that we absolutely need. My opinion is that if our employees move out of state, I think that's a different case. I don't know that our hands should be forced to allow them to work from a different state and continue their employment in King County. People figured it out other times before COVID. People can continue to figure it out, and it allows us to put some parameters in there. So if I can just recap, my opinion would be to allow somebody to work out of state that is highly specialized, that we all recognize is someone that cannot be found in the area. And two, if somebody moves out of state, outside of an elected official who has internal control, I would say that we could probably find somebody here to work who needs a job in King County.
We continue to take shape with this. Dr. Silva, thank you. I might comment to you that at some point in time, the discussion of this internal control is going to need to bubble to a head. The idea that we as a collective county are the governing body that does this, and that, but people that participate in those employee benefits, in those payroll systems, in those purchasing departments, don't have to play by the same rules that the other groups do. They certainly have the ability to say, we just don't want to participate and we'll do our own thing, and work within their own budget to allow them to do that. That is certainly their privilege to do, as I understand it. We just have never tiptoed up to that line. Yeah, that's something where we've said, no, we want a big kumbaya and everybody works under this umbrella. But they certainly have the ability to say, we don't agree with the rules that you're making. We have internal control. We are going to do it a different way, to which we would say, that just doesn't fit our system. Feel free to do this on your own within the budget that we've given to you. So
That's wonderful.
I mean, no, that's dicey. That's a really
Yeah.
slippery slope. I don't want to go near.
I guess what I feel, what my comment to that would be, Mr. Chair, is that it is a good expectation. However, by law, there are internal control parameters, and we are tasked with supporting the budget. So if there's a need for a highly specialized individual in a particular field, the
Agreed.
need is
Understood.
real. So we have to work with that elected official to provide for that need for King County.
Understood. Mr. Tarver.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know when this came out a couple months ago, I had reached out to you and Jamie had sent a reply, so I appreciate that. And I've also done a little bit of research and understand that this has really become an issue for a lot of public entities as well. I just want confirmation, the 4 employees that are currently involved with this situation, they are all remote. They do not travel to the county on any business whatsoever. Is that correct?
To my knowledge, that is correct.
And being grandfathered in would mean that we would continue to support them being an out-of-state employee. This is all for future hires. Is that correct?
Penny Wegman has just come to the podium.
I do want to mention that there is at least one that I know off the top of my head that does travel back to Illinois from their remote location, and we do pay for their PEV for that travel.
Thank you.
Penny. Bill, does that answer your question?
It does. And just to confirm, the grandfather part is that we would continue to work with those employees. This is just for new hires moving forward.
Yeah, I think that's the shape I'm hearing. Yes.
Thank you. Everyone else had shared some of my own concerns and comments, so thank you.
Thanks, Bill. Mavis, you had, and I'm going to step past Madam Chair and Mr. Tepe because Mavis had her hand up earlier. Mavis, are you still there?
Can you hear me?
Yep, there you
Can
go.
you hear me?
Hi, Mavis.
Okay. I worked at Bell Labs for 20 years, and it was even back when I did it, work from home was very accepted. And I don't want us to get behind the times in terms of accepting that specialists and experts in their field get to live and work pretty much wherever they want. And if we need their expertise badly enough, we should be ready and willing to work with them from wherever they are. I don't think an actuarial or a statistical, a statistician, we don't lose anything by their not being here. They're doing their specialized job where they are. And I think we have to, not get behind the times.
Yeah, Mavis, I do, not to cut you off, but I do think, we've explained that I do believe there's a difference between a work from home scenario and I don't live here and I work from home out of state scenario, and trying to differentiate between those two. And I think we are absolutely, what I'm hearing is we absolutely are saying if there is a specialty that can't be found or provided for within our area, that going outside looks to be the way to go here. And then
okay,
the third.
you interrupted me before I got to say.
I did. Go ahead.
That I believe 1099s are not a bad way to go. I think 1099. I don't know who's against that, but it would solve.
Yeah, we were told it doesn't work.
1099s
Yeah,
would solve this whole problem. No?
I agree, and I was told it from the state's attorney's office it's not applicable. So
Why?
I don't know. I swing and a miss. I tried really hard on that. Kathy just raised her hand, and
Okay, thank you. I'm
we're
done.
at 10 till, by
Thank
the
you.
way. So
That's against the IRS rules. An employee that is defined as an employee, you're required to pay payroll taxes, state taxes, and they are by definition employee within the state. So you cannot move to 1099ing to avoid employment and tax law.
And my understanding was when I mentioned finding a leasing service where we could lease these employees through, the problem became IMRF and stuff like that. We couldn't extend that to them because they weren't our employee. They would be the employee of the leasing company. So I got shot down, and believe me, we've tried, several different ways to
Okay,
skin this
thanks.
cat. Yeah, and that's why we're kind of bringing
Okay,
it back,
thank you.
saying, if we're gonna do it, we
Thank
need
you.
to fund it and figure that out. So, okay,
Okay,
Madam
thanks.
Chair, Vern, did you have any comments?
I just want to add something on the costs. So I know from one of the situations that we were just dealing with this fall when somebody wanted to move out of state, a lot of the costs are all of the upfront research costs because we are not built here to understand the state of whatever state. And so we had to even contract with an accounting firm to understand all of the payroll tax issues in that other state. And we eventually, the situation did not go forward, but a lot of the costs in having somebody move out of state are basically your research costs, understanding what's involved, what will we have to do? And it's not, you know, as Jamie has explained, all of the compliance that we even have to follow in our state. Because we would need to make sure, you know, do the risk assessment that we are compliant with all of those other rules in another state. So that's where a lot of the cost. There are some transactional costs when, you know, when you're processing payroll, we have special separate procedures that we follow to pay the taxes, the payroll taxes for the employees who are out of state. That's not, yeah, it's an extra step that we have to do, but it's not that costly. It's all of this upfront research costs.
I'm just suggesting that if we used an outside service for some of this, like ADP, we could actually do their payroll, their taxes, and their workers' compensation through an outside vendor for those employees. But I understand that that would fall outside of our norm, but are we not considering outside the box conversations here? I see you, Mr. Roth had his hand up, then we'll come back to Dr. Silva.
Okay. Roth here. One question. Are the current 4 salary or time card? Or hourly?
I believe they would all be salaried employees, but I can't give you a 100%
Okay.
answer on that.
All right. And then I'm going to bring up the 1099 because over the last 20 years, I've actually been a 1099 and you're not an employee if you're a 1099. And that's what changes the rules. You're a consultant.
An independent contractor.
Right,
yes.
right. And in fact, you know, the government made up a new term during COVID, the gig worker. And I qualified as a gig worker during that time. That addresses, you're not treating them as an employee, you're treating them as a consultant. And the determine whether they're salary or, you know, hourly
Right.
can be determined by the person. So that addresses the legality, I would think, because they're consultant. You know, we're using those currently, you know, like I'm sure in IT, Roger's using consultants on a 1099.
Understood. And we can go deeper and let's not,
Okay. And then, but one other,
not go deeper in there.
No,
but
I
we
understand.
Understand that. We can research it.
okay, one other thing though, you want to have a limit because I know some government agencies have gotten carried away and tried to outsource like an entire department, like to India or something like that. And that'll never fly. So we
I
need to have
appreciate that
some-
perspective as well.
Yeah.
Dr. Silva, you had one more?
Yes, thank you. So I'm going to continue to on the path that I am regarding highly specialized individuals where we could cap this for highly specialized individuals only until somebody gives me a better reason not to. But if I'm an employee of King County, that's just, you know, I'm a staff person, whoever, in whatever department of King County, and I'm working here. And then Ms. Gums is also an employee of King County. Ms. Gums moves to California because she loves the weather better. And she and I are doing the same job, same exact job, or same department in comparable positions at the same whatever tier. She moves to California because you really like her and you love the way she works. And I'm still here. Why can't I work from home? Why can't I? Because Ms. Gums moved to
I understand the
California.
complexities.
Why can't I
That's
work
why
from
we're
home?
discussing it. So
Because I'm going to want to work from home sometimes too.
I
So
get it.
that's why I think it's very important to put a parameter on it. And I think it should be highly specialized individuals.
Yeah, heard that loud and clear. Okay, it's 5 till. Ms. Juby, did you have one more thing to add? And then we're going to close this out because I don't think we're going to, while I would love to say the next portion of this is finance and we'll move this to Mr. Berman's committee, I don't believe that we have any consensus whatsoever coming out of here, and we should probably have this on our agenda again next month and let's refine some of the conversations. Ms. Juby?
Okay, so I'm not going to repeat what everybody else said. I am a proponent of remote working. I believe the state of Illinois does not allow remote working. However, they do allow 1099s. So without beating a dead horse, if you terminate them from the county and then hire them back as an independent contractor, I think you're safe. The other thing is there's states that have reciprocity agreements with the state of Illinois. Wisconsin is one of them, which means that there is no added for the tax. You can argue all you want. I'm just telling you that the state of Illinois says that the state of Wisconsin has tax reciprocity and that they can seamlessly do it without the extra paperwork. I'm not gonna argue. You can shake your head. I'm just saying it's something we need to look at because
Ms. Juby, I see no one arguing. Thank you for the input. So wonderful. So, again, I don't think we have any consensus here. But Jamie and Kathy, do you have enough input to maybe begin honing some information to come back with?
What information would you like us to hone? I mean, if you want to be clear about what information you'd like us to come back with, I certainly can.
I'm happy to take it offline with you and
Okay.
we'll come up with something to present. Dr. Silva?
Yeah, so I love the fact of allowing people to work from home, 1099s, if that would work. I forget the term that you used. So how about
Was it gig worker?
gate worker?
Gate or gig? G-I-G, gig.
Oh, gig
Oh.
worker. Okay. So some of us on the board like that option. Of course, we need to stay legal. So is it possible to get somebody from the state's attorney's office in here to ask them those questions and to have them explain to us why or why not?
Certainly.
Mr. Shepherd's online.
I am also online.
And I don't know if that's a conversation we wish to continue right here and now, given
we
the
do not.
time. But my question would be for future is, I'd like to understand why or why not 1099s or gig work situation couldn't work for our employees in that circumstance.
Yeah, I think I understand enough. And with the other two individuals, I think that we can pull something together and have enough facts to continue this conversation at the next level. If you'll indulge me on that, I would appreciate that.
Certainly. We can research that and come back with those answers for you.
Okay, item number
You have a question?
Just really quick, when you asked for a little direction, I apologize, I'm not on this thing, but what I would like to see, I'm not on this, so even next month, I can't say much, but I would like to see what it looks like to have policy and procedure on remote across line. I mean, that has to happen, whether we want to, so I would like to see that because I can't decide on something I don't know how it reads. Are we going to look at only specialized people? Also, something that's glaringly obvious to me through these spectacles is you have to look at this as a future. I mean, this is not a thing of the past. It's not a COVID thing. We can't be stagnant in every single
Agreed.
thing that we do. So we have to be forward thinking and we have to figure out how to accommodate and acclimate to that. And my second question would be, are there one-stop shops that handle, like we could contract in a payroll policy place? I know the answer to this, but they handle that throughout the country. And this is not new to them. It's not creating something new. So I would like to hear back about how the other states and how the other governments are handling that, because they are doing it. So.
Thank you, Ms. Gumbs. Item 10, new business. Item A, resolution amending the personnel policy handbook section regarding extended illness leave. Before we dive into that, I would like consensus that Mr. Lindner and Miss Allen, who joined late, would be okay to cast vote on this.
Yes.
I think we have consensus in the affirmative on that. Thank you very much. Jamie, could you introduce this and then we'll move forward?
Certainly, this is a housekeeping item. We recently passed the ordinance regarding the paid leave for all workers last month. That policy for that short-term personal and sick leave was on the same policy as the extended illness leave. As such, we are separating this out. It's really a restatement of our extended illness leave. We clarified some language that we regularly have questions on, but ultimately there is no change in policy associated with this. It's a housekeeping due to that change in the short-term sick leave.
Ms. Lewis, could I have a motion for that?
Yes.
Mr. Kenyon seconds.
Seconder.
Any discussion? Please call the vote.
Alan,
Alan, I.
Kenyon,
Yes.
Lewis,
Yes.
Silva,
Silva, yes.
Barbara, I believe, left. Linder? Mr. Linder?
Mike, are you still on? Move past.
Sturgis?
Yes.
Passes.
Item B, resolution establishing the Office Community Reinvestment Finance and Administration Division, the position of Assistant Director of Finance and Administration, and the transfer of workforce development fiscal staff from the Finance Department to the Office of Community Reinvestment. Who is going to present this? Was that you or Kathy? I'm sorry, you meaning Jamie or Kathy? I apologize.
I don't know if Mr. Berger is online to present it. It's ultimately coming from his office, but Kathy may know more about it.
Yeah, this is from Scott Berger's office, the Office of Community Reinvestment. He has several functions under his office, including workforce development and community development. And 3 of the staff who serve workforce development in its entirety have resided in the county's finance department for a number of years. It has a long history going back to some cleanup that needed to be done for the processing of financial transactions for workforce development. The lead person on this team of 3 resigned last month, and looking at that as an opportunity to move the remaining 2 staff back over to workforce development, reconfigure the role of the person who left and make that role a person who oversees the accounting staff, not only the 2 workforce development staff, but also the 2 accounting staff who do all the transaction processing for the community development side of OCR. And then cross-train all those accounting staff so that they could provide services. The 4 positions could provide services for all of OCR's activity. So that was what this resolution is doing. It's doing 2 things. It's creating sort of a new financial unit within the OCR department, and then also creating a new position essentially.
Mr. Berger, are you in agreement with that assessment?
Kathy has provided you an excellent summary of our measure before you
Thank you.
today.
Appreciate that. And Kathy, if I can leapfrog 1 second, item C is a finance department or organization grant unit. Are these 2 tied in together? What's the significance of?
So in our 2024 budget, for the county finance department, we eliminated a staff accounting position. Because when Joe left, Erica left, we promoted 2 people. So we had a staff accounting position left. We replaced that position with a brand new position called a grant administrator, because there was a lot of discussion about how the departments of development, not OCR, but Mark Van Kerkhoff's department, the Department of Development, Jody Walnick's Environment Department, and the Health Department need both assistance writing grants to get additional revenue and also administering those grants once they get those new grants. And so it was decided that the best place to sort of kick off and manage this effort would be the finance department, since we are knee-deep in processing grant transactions every day. I'll add, there's a ARPA team that's doing ARPA accounting, but 2 of my staff probably spend anywhere from 6 to 8 hours a week on ARPA. Since we have ARPA, ARPA will be here for at least another 3 years in terms of processing transactions. So there's a lot of institutional knowledge in the finance department for processing grants, understanding grants, the financial reporting associated with grants. So we're going to be creating this unit. And right now, the idea is to kick it off for the Departments of Development, Environment, and Health.
Okay, I am almost hearing conflicting on this because I'm almost hearing Kathy say that grants should be administered through or reconciled, if you will, through the finance department. And what I'm actually hearing Scott say is we want to broaden our efforts so those are being done in-house, separate from finance. Am I hearing that wrong or?
Well, Scott can go ahead if he wants. I'll speak a
It'd be
little
so
bit
much
about what
easier
the
if I
vote-
had big old org charts that we could put on screens and be able to
Right,
understand this. Because this is a whole lot of language that I'm having trouble mapping who's saying what, doing what. And you and Scott, both as department heads, probably know this like the freckles on the back of your hand. Us sitting here are saying, I don't even know what you're saying. So
I think there's a lot of skill sets involved in processing financial transactions, right? So for any grant, anywhere, starting off with applying for a grant, it's somebody who has to understand all sorts of federal or state rules and regulations or nonprofit, rules and regulations. There's forms. You really have to have a talent for reading and understanding all sorts of regulations. You have to be able to write. You have to be able to go back and forth with an organization that's either a federal or a private organization, such as like a big charitable foundation, and understand what they're looking for. So that's one big skill set. Processing, let's say, accounts payable transactions, which support a grant, right? Because at the end of the day, once you get the grant, you're going to be paying expenses. Processing, daily transactions, those sorts of things, those are a different sort of skill set. Processing reimbursement request documents, different sort of a skill set. The grant administration unit that is, we're looking at starting in the finance department is more on the top end, understanding all the regulations, understanding the financial reporting aspect. I think the positions that are the two workforce positions, I can't speak too much about the other two positions in OCR, but it's more along the lines of traditional accounting processing type of positions.
so this is not in conflict. This is in concert.
It's not in conflict. I mean, certainly, anything is possible, right? Every department, for example, KDOT has a whole team of people who apply for federal money from IDOT all day long. That's all that they do. You'd want to keep all those people there because they work with all the engineers. They need to understand all the projects. You wouldn't want to necessarily bring every sort of grant function into the finance department. But the three departments, development, environment, and health, really feel that they would operate best. They don't need like a full-time grant administrator position or a full-time grant writer. And that's why it was thought that we could have a shared person overseen by the finance department, because we are, at the end of the day, we are the ones who are producing the single audit report, which is the audit of all of our federal expenditures at the county.
I think that conduit is essential. Yeah.
Right. So we're the ones who, at the end of every fiscal year, we're pulling in all of that federal reporting from, we are working with all the departments. We have to collect all that information. Our team has that sort of institutional historical knowledge of all of the grant reporting, all of the risks associated with reporting federal expenditures, particularly federal expenditures.
And if I can just jump in for a second for the committee's education. Scott, if you can see on screen the org chart that's been put up. Are you there?
Yes, I do see
You're
it.
talking about the box on the left in red, correct?
Yes, that's correct. The box in red is the new unit that we're talking about creating.
Okay, and in a previous meeting with Scott and Jamie, Scott brought to our attention that the amount of money that he brings in to his department, if you will, in excess of $20 million. Is that remotely accurate?
That is correct.
And Scott was very kind in expressing that $20 million is not Kane County. It's actually 3 different counties that split from that pot that we oversee. Is that remotely correct?
Yes, my office oversees funding for 3 different counties and as well as 3 different municipalities that extend into 2 other counties.
Okay, and the positions that you're asking for here create a financial need of, have we established what that, have you and Kathy discussed that? And is that funded from a general fund type of scenario? Or is that one of those situations where they're grant funded? How does that work? Just,
My office receives no funding from the general fund. All of our expenses, including those associated with this business item, are paid for with external sources, non-Kane County tax funds.
thank you. So for resolution, for item B resolution, that has been introduced. Do we have a motion to move that forward?
Alan moves.
Alan moves. Lewis seconds. Do we have any questions on that? Anita?
Linder,
Let me do, Anita had her hand up first, Mike, and then we'll come to you.
So I just have a quick question. Last month when we had this discussion about Scott's person leaving and the reorganization, we were worried about some compliance with some state reporting that needed to get done right away. And I believe it was said then that Kathy's group was jumping in. So I was kind of confused then, and I still am, about if Kathy's group could jump in and do this reporting for us, could they continue to do that? Is there an overlap here or what? I'm just not quite understanding that part of it.
Yeah, I mean, since this person left, in her main role, she oversaw 2 staff accountants and she was essentially a manager over those 2 staff accountants.
Yeah, dive into that, Mike, would you?
2 of my other staff have had to jump in and pick up and do her work until this decision is made over where this function is going to reside. Until there is any sort of decision made, it is the responsibility of the finance department to get all of these. And there's a whole bunch of various state reports that need to get filed almost like every week to get them filed. It's my responsibility.
So Anita, to pigtail onto your conversation, your question there, if Scott is funded entirely by grants and your person is working with 3 other departments and or offices that are funded by grants, are your people funded from general fund or can we ask them to be reimbursed from these grants as well?
So the 3 positions that currently report to me, but all they do 100% of their time is processing transactions for OCR's Workforce Development Department. None of any of their salary and benefit costs come from the general fund. All of their, in fact, the Workforce Development Unit is not even in the county budget because it's considered a state program.
Look at how much we're learning. It's a great day.
This is that thing they call WIOA.
Yeah.
Basically is what it is.
So none of,
Talk about on Fridays.
regardless of where these positions, who they report to, their salaries and their benefits are funded by the state.
Thank you so much. Mr. Linder?
okay, 2 related questions. We have a resolution to create a position with a dollar figure that we've already established as a salary. Do we have a job description yet for that? And secondly, Kathy, you brought to mind, you have this new position of grant administrator in your office. Is there a job description for that job?
I believe that first question is for Scott. The second question is for Kathy.
Right.
Yes, we've established a job description for our new assistant director position.
It hasn't been submitted and approved?
Yes.
Hang on one second. Ms. Labrillo is coming to the podium.
He did submit a job description to us, which we then graded and provided a salary range that was consistent with the compensation policy. The salary that is reflected on this resolution is not the salary that came out of that compensation policy. If you want that position to be compliant with the compensation policy rather than separate from it, you would need to amend this to say the annual salary as determined by the compensation policy rather than including a specific salary. That's a choice for the board.
Mike, are you motioning to amend that?
No, I'm still asking questions here. So
I'm sorry.
the salary that came out of that job description is significantly outside that, is this one significantly outside that range?
It's not significantly outside, only slightly. It is up in that area, but it did not extend quite to that amount.
I have a concern that we spend a lot of time and energy, and time and energy equals money, doing a compensation policy, and the first month out, we're starting to vary from it. That's just a concern.
The variance is less than 2%.
And 2% times 1,300 employees is what?
Understood.
I don't have that figure for you.
Yeah, understood.
I didn't
Ms.
expect
Lewis?
that.
I would, like to put in the amendment that, as Jamie said, that it needs to, the salary needs to be determined by the, by the compensation policy. Or
I'll
however you
second
want to
that.
word that. Okay.
Is there a second
My
to that?
concern
Lender,
is that, Mr. Chairman.
Scott,
this
go
is
ahead.
Scott. My concern is that will create inequity in my department because I have a salary amount that I pay my assistant directors. And the figure that Jamie calculated puts this new assistant director below that level. So that would create inequity in my department.
Jamie?
Those people are far more senior, being that they have been in their position for decades. So I think that the slight variance is certainly more than justified in terms of equal compensation and equity. In addition, I think maintaining equity with our finance department staff who do very similar work. The work of his other directors is very much distinguished by the fact that they are program managers rather than financial people. And I think we are better to draw a comparison to the finance department staff rather than his program staff to ensure equity. So I believe that following the compensation policy, actually, we took a lot of that into consideration with our current employees, and it remains equitable to follow the compensation policy.
Okay, do we have a second to Ms. Lewis's amendment?
Lender, yes, I seconded.
Conversation on that?
Mr. Chairman, Alan,
Ms. Allen?
I believe in our compensation, our new compensation protocol, that there was a variance allowed of and I don't remember what we settled on. Was it 25% or 50% or 75%? Does that cover the situation? Can I ask?
Ms. Labrillo?
That was 75% that was decided on. And when Mr. Berger stated a 2% variance, that was based on the upper limit. So that's 75%. So offering whoever is chosen for this position, the absolute top of the choice would be a 2% variance versus the number of the resolution.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I do want to add that I have a very well qualified, very experienced prospective applicant for this position that would be an ideal fit for the job, and I think necessitates a higher pay. So I would like the ability to offer that pay to that person.
Understood. Thank you. Any other conversation on this? And again, this is just a first stop in a process that goes next to finance. Is that correct? Or is it end
No,
all right here?
This is the third stop. This has been approved by the Development Committee, my parent committee, the Finance Committee, and now comes to you prior to going to executive and the full board. There are a total of 5 meetings required for this
So it goes
resolution.
to exec from here.
Correct.
Okay, we call the vote on the
Yeah, so,
amendment.
so the amendment would be on this is Louis, on page 55, which is up on the thing, down in the very last paragraph. We would change that in the amendment to is hereby created with an annual salary as determined by our, whatever the name of the policy is, instead of that salary that we have in there right now.
I believe you're suggesting to strike the 122,570 and put
Yes,
a reference to the compensation study.
yes.
Chair,
Yes, Mr. Berger.
I think we're discussing a discrepancy that equals $2,000. So you're contemplating holding me to no more than 120 instead of 122. 100% of which is paid for by non-county funds.
Understood.
But I think it goes to the point that, as I think it was Miss Allen that said, we just went through a whole year of very painstaking work to make these salary ranges correct. And now the first time out of the gate, we're saying something different. And so I don't disagree or agree with what you're saying, Scott, but I do believe that we need to, in our policies, stay within those salaries. And then if there's anything different, work that out between the department heads and whoever needs to actually make those decisions on that one-by-one basis. But I think our policies and our resolution here should be to the right amount.
But to be clear, you want one of my assistant directors to be paid less than the others.
Yeah, because I think what Kathy said, or Jamie, is that this salary is in line with the financial salaries here at the county.
Yes,
Is that correct?
that is.
I'm sorry.
Yes, I was the one that said that, and this salary is comparable to the financial salaries. In addition, the 2 other directors in that department have considerable tenure here with the county that would account easily for that difference.
Mr. Davist has his hand up. He is not a member of the committee. I would like permission to go ahead and,
Absolutely.
Mr. Davist?
Good morning. Thank you. Davist here. Without trying to weigh in on this specific instance, I do want to remind everybody, I know Anita was talking about, we've put all of this time and effort and energy into our internal, quest for structure. But it has been my understanding after many meetings and discussions that we needed to get to this point so that we could begin the external comparisons, which would in fact lead us to changing some of these in all likelihood, that we now are able to sort of enter phase 2 where we look at the outside world and the reality of the markets and what it takes to hire people. So there are going to be some deviations from what has been set up, not because it was flawed per se, but because we had to get there before we could move into this part. So I just want to put that out there that we, keep an open mind. This is really still part of the process.
Mark, thank you. Could we call the vote, please, on the amendment?
Well, stop, please, Linda.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mike. Did I sometimes when the hands go up, we forget to take them down. I see your hand up. Sorry.
Yeah, I did
Go
put
ahead.
it down shortly. I'm a little bit offended by the notion that because it's grant funded, it doesn't matter what we spend. And I know that's not exactly what Scott said, but over and over again, I hear this. This is our responsibility. This is service to our communities. And we're not allowed to just spend the money because it's free. I'm offended by that. But with that, I'm ready to vote.
Thank you, sir. Please call the roll.
On the
Call the
amendment,
vote on the amendment.
Allen,
Alan, no.
Kenyon,
Yes.
Lewis,
Lewis, yes.
Silva,
Silva, yes.
Linder,
Linder, yes.
Sturgis.
Surges, yes.
It is amended.
We're back to the resolution at hand. Without further conversation, please call the roll for the vote for that as amended.
Allen,
Alan, I.
Kenyon,
Yes.
Lewis,
Lewis, yes.
Silva,
Silva, yes.
Linder,
Linder, yes.
Sturgis.
Surges, yes.
Passes.
Item C, Finance Department Organization Grant Unit.
Alan moves.
Thank you, Deb. Lewis seconds. Open for conversation. Please call the vote.
There's no resolution.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
It was just, it was a.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I misread
Right,
that.
oh, yeah, that's right.
I'm sorry. It didn't say discussion. It was under resolution. I apologize. You have my, okay, Mr. Kenyon.
I got
Motion to
all
replace
excited
reports
too.
on file.
Yes.
Ms. Lewis, is
Yeah, I'll second that.
that an all in favor?
Aye.
All in favor for place reports on file?
Aye.
Aye,
Aye.
opposed? I see no need for executive session.
I have a question before.
Motion to adjourn.
Wait, no,
Wait, yes, ma'am.
following up on what Mr. Linder said, I would like to, as much as possible, when we put in these new jobs, to actually see the job description, maybe attached or something if it's brand new.
I
That's
think
all.
we could accommodate that.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Okay, now,
Public comment online or in person. Mr. Kenyon.
Move to adjourn.
thank you.
Dr. Silva seconds.
Sure.
All in favor of adjournment?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, everyone.